Hi everyone, so it is Catherine and Dave here with Fantasy Fitnessing, and we are just going to do a little bit of a chat about sort of the strength of the semifinals now that most of the athletes have been seeded into the semifinals. Not everything's complete, things are still changing, but just as of today, and probably most of the big names are sort of set of where they're going. So this is probably a pretty good sort of layout of how strong each semifinal is. So yeah, I'm just going to pass it off to Dave. We're going to look at the relative strength of all 10 semifinals. So do you want to start with the men or the women?
Yeah, let's start it off with the men. So we did some digging, as we tend to do, just to see if there's a better way to compare some of the semifinals that have going on with each other. So starting out, I guess, with the men's side, I guess kind of across the board, as you'd expect, Cape Town and Far East were the weakest of the two, or weakest of the semifinals there. Looking from a open perspective, the Atlas Games definitely jumped out as the strongest field. So the average finish of men in the open this year who are going to Atlas, 297th spot. Next up is MAC at 308th. And there's kind of filters down. In this case, actually, most of the semifinals are actually pretty similar for both in Europe and North America, kind of in that average finish of about 400, which when you look at a field of 30 individuals, pretty good. Moving on to quarterfinal finishes, I guess just looking within the continents themselves, everything was actually quite even on the men's side. So both Lowlands and Sid or Strength and Depth have an average finish of 31st, which is pretty much what you would expect, even from a seeding standpoint in Europe, just with some backfills. So yeah, right on the money there. In North America, men, so both Syndicate, MAC, and Granite, so they all have an average finish of 60th. Again, what you would expect out of a field of 120 that's being sent across. Atlas, a little bit weaker with an average finish of 62nd, but again, all pretty even across the board there. But then things, again, start to get a little bit more interesting once we took a look at, again, all those athletes, but then from a worldwide ranking. So when we're taking a look at the worldwide ranking from Europe, 110th was the average finish for both Strength and Depth and Lowlands there. So they are, again, the two strongest. But then the North America semifinals are right behind. I think, Syndicate and MAC, both 113, 118 for Atlas and Granite. And then, a couple of the other ones, and one that's kind of sticks out here just because you don't really think of it. The South American sort of the Copa semifinal, was next strongest here with an average finish of 196. So stronger than kind of a general field strength, stronger than, Torian, which has received a lot of hype. So South America has an average finish of 196, while, Torian, has an average finish of 237. So, it's interesting to see kind of that play out across the board, just at a larger level.
Yeah.
And so
it's kind of like, in terms of looking at it open and quarterfinals, it doesn't really say that much, but that says a lot that the South American men on average are actually stronger than Torian.
Yeah, and by a significant margin too. So like an average of 40 spots. It definitely shows like there's a lot more strength in South America than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just to take it a little bit further, just because that field size is big, and like having 30 athletes competing at these game spots, especially, when there's one or two available in some of them, it's not a 30-person competition. Like as much as, there's 3 heats and, it's great to watch. There is only, a handful of cases or a handful of athletes that you are watching in some of the case. So we kind of took our, quarterfinal ranks and then kind of narrowed it down a bit more to just the athletes that can advance. So, in North America, where 5 athletes go to the games and 3 athletes are going to the last chance. So we kind of took a measure of the top 8 athletes in the worldwide quarterfinals in both North America and Europe. Top 5 for Torian, top 6 for Torian, top 5 for both the Far East and South America, and then top 4 for Cape Town there, since you only get the 1 entry to the games. And then again, this is, I think, really where the strength of field is going to stand out, at least from a competition standpoint, and, fighting for those tickets. So, again, looking at it that standpoint, MAC, Syndicate, and South America are all right in there to be the tightest games competition based off of quarterfinal rankings, all with 27, just a shade over 27 as an average finish, which, again, it's really impressive to see South America up there. And then Atlas and Granite are super close there, again, on the men's side, both 31.5, 32 in that range. So definitely the strength of the men's field is in North America and South America based off of this. Both Europe semifinals, again, pretty similar there, at a 37.5 for Lowlands, 40.6 for strength and depth. And then, again, trailing quite far behind is Torian with 52.5. Again, it is actually quite surprising to see this out, because you kind of see your kind of the big 4 out of Torian with, Ricky Garrard, Jay Crouch, Baden Brown, and Royce Dunn, although I guess Royce pulls down this average quite significantly. But, again, just to see where the concentration of strength for these game potential athlete lies is pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is super interesting to look at the field this way, of who sort of qualified in the top from quarters and their worldwide rank. Yeah, South America is going to be fun to watch. I'm excited.
Yeah, we touched on it, like how I think there was, 4 South American men in the top 50 worldwide.
Yeah, we did a post on that.
Less.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting to see just how strong that field is coming out. Like it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet. And then on to the women's side of the semifinals.
Yeah, so looking at the women, I think from an open standpoint, the one that really jumps out is strength and depth. So their average open finish was 218th, where next closest was MAC at 314th. So from an open standpoint, strength and depth is, head and shoulders above everybody else. Lowlands was third at 382. Then you have the other North American semifinals coming in at 433 with Granite, and 505 for Syndicate, and 565 with Atlas. Again, similar trends on the women's side, with South America actually being stronger than Torian. Again, from an overall field strength in the open, with South America being roughly 40 spots ahead of the Torian group from an open standpoint. Yeah, so I guess moving on to quarterfinals, Europe is pretty close with a 29th average in Lowlands and 31st in strength and depth. So pretty similar. My guess is that discrepancy just came out from backfills that haven't been accepted yet, since not everything is filled as of April 19th at this point. But jumping out, when you look at North America, Granite, MAC, and Syndicate, they're all quite similar. But then you see Atlas Games. So, it is average finish to 64th, where Granite, MAC, and Syndicate are 58th, 59th, and 60th. So you're kind of seeing a difference from the strength of field standpoint, which is going to be interesting going into the semifinals to see, again, just the different types of, athlete and qualification levels that do come out of these events. Which then gets, almost further exaggerated once we get to the worldwide ranking. So, both just, looking at these North American qualifier or semifinals, Granite Games and the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge both have an average worldwide finish of 117th for women, the Syndicate Crown 124th, but then Atlas Games, it jumps up to an average finish of 130th. So, when we look at the athletes that are going to be coming out of the semifinals, and once we get to the games, I think we're going to see probably a pretty level or clear differentiating line between the athletes that qualify kind of in those, third, fourth, fifth positions out of Atlas versus some of the other semifinals on the women's side.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Atlas is it has the least number of those four in terms of like registered athletes. So I think most of the backfill spots are going to be loaded into Atlas too.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is just going to grow. Like this discrepancy is going to grow between the two. So again, from CrossFit having one region and a qualifying tournament to get into it, to see this difference is pretty surprising.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised at how this is playing out.
Yeah. And then kind of the story of kind of the off season has been how strong the European women have. And then again, when you look at the worldwide quarterfinals average, you see Lowlands has an average of 79th, Strength and Depth has an average of 86 in the finish. So again, like 30, 35 spots higher than the best North American semifinals. So it shows again how much stronger the general field is with these European semifinals. And then I guess looking at the other two, once we look at the worldwide ranking, Torian and South America are almost identical. So Torian's 237, South America is 242 for an average quarterfinal finish. Taking a look at our qualifying athletes, our qualifying spots from the worldwide rankings, Lowlands, Strength and Depth, again, continuing to show their strength of the field. So average quarterfinal finish of the top 8 athletes at Lowland on the women's side, 22, Strength and Depth, 24.6. Next up is Granite Games and Syndicate at 34.9 and 34.4 respectively. So again, like to have an average finish of 10 better in the European semifinals than the North American semifinals, that's pretty significant. Then we have right after that South America 35.8, Strength of Torian really starting to show now at 38. Then we have Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Championship at 42, and then again that big bump up to Atlas at 53.8. So again, even the top end of that field isn't kind of in the same ballpark as any of these other North American semifinals, and certainly not the European ones. So if I'm a bubbly athlete or someone who can raise their hand and say, yeah, I'll go to Canada, I'd be waving my hand wildly trying to get some attention to be shifted around to go to Atlas. I just your chances are so much better that way.
Yeah, with this shift happening, like our other athletes, are they now seeing their semifinals being loaded and be like, can I go there? How about there?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like if Emily Rolfe, so she's the only Canadian competing at Granite. So if I'm her as a Canadian to be like, hey, like you want this to be competitive, I'll go to Atlas. And goes from, I can't remember who's, at Granite, but it's got Mel O'Brien, it's got Barnhart. It's got Barnhart,
I'll get it.
Spiegel. Like if I'm Emily Rolfe, I was like, where you're potentially 4th, 5th, kind of on the bubble. Fisa Gappy's there.
Especially after Fee missing out last year. I would, if I was her, I'd be like, let's go to Atlas.
Yeah. So, it'd be interesting to see like how much more competitive these other events are.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, if any of this matters or not. All right, so that's sort of our little comparison of the semifinals' relative strength to each other, looking at the fields from open, quarterfinals, and worldwide quarterfinal kind of ranks. And then we're just going to kind of just do a little bit of a spin-off of what this kind of can mean for our salary cap games that we're going to be setting up for the semifinals.
Right. So I guess to give everybody a recap. Salary cap game. You have a fictional budget of $250, and you need to pick 3 men and 3 women athletes to fill out your team. So each athlete is given a dollar value or a cost just based off of their relative past performance and how they stack up against everyone in the field. And the points they earn at a semifinal will be your team score. So I guess when I look at this, I guess, there's still going to be your for sure athletes. So Mal O'Brien, that week I'm taking her for sure. So what week is that? So the third week, definitely will be having Mal O'Brien on my team. Tia Toomey, maybe even Kara Sanders, depending on how you're looking from that standpoint. So really the ones that you are almost certain they are going to, take the victory. I'm going to take them on my roster for sure, just to have those guaranteed points. Since it is such a diverse field, the athletes that are going to give me a little bit of pause, are going to give me a little bit of anxiousness, are kind of in those like 3, 4, 5 range, or probably like 3 to 8 that we see. And when you kind of browse that leaderboard of how it's going to play out. So, taking a look at that, like an Emily Roll for a Fisa Gaffey at Granite Games. Like if the programming goes well, she could be 4th. If the programming doesn't go well or performance doesn't go well, she could end up in, 8th or 9th. Which, when you look at those competitions, the points that we see between them, can be pretty drastic. So last year at Granite, Ariel Lowland finished first place with 608 points. But then when you look down at, Steph Chung in 8th there, 412, or 412 points. So, there is a lot of points to be gained and lost there. So for me, I'm going to be looking, again, for the for sure things first. And then, after that in strength of field, I'm probably going to err on the side of caution of that, if there's a for sure thing, like an Emma Lawson maybe at Atlas Games, once that gets a little bit closer, that's going to give me a lot more confidence than trying to pick, between, Jackie Dahlstrom or Emma McQuaid or Katrin David's daughter at, strength and depth. So certainly from a field strength, going to be a lot more cautious. If I had to choose between somebody who's probably going to finish 2nd and 3rd, Granite or Atlas, I'm going to take Atlas just because I feel like they're going to be a lot more of a sure thing than an athlete in a field that's going to be stiffer competition.
Yeah, so the stronger athletes in the weaker fields are probably more of a sure thing, kind of.
Yeah, I think so. And then like you can also, depending on some of the weekends, start to play, again, into those top tier of athletes. So, when we look at like the men's field, the last week, so we got Atlas Games, Strength and Depth, and Copa Sur, depending on, pricing and, how everything lays out, chances are I'm going to have, one of Vellner and Adler on my team, and one of Guy and Rochelle May on my team. Just, I think that those 4 guys are both, going to be head and shoulders over everybody else in their semifinal. And so I'll take those, as guaranteed points as you can get in sports. And then just try to, pick some kind of up and comers or some wild card dark horses that, might be able to surprise everybody else.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so that's it for our kind of semi-final preview show and a little strategy for your salary cap games. We're going to be running a salary cap game every week of the 4 weeks with the athletes loaded that are competing that weekend. So you'll get a new team to cheer for each weekend and follow along on the weekend. So make sure you are following us at Fantasy Fitnessing on Instagram and have an account at fantasyfitnessing.com. because those are going to be the channels for communication when we kick off those games. So make sure you get logged on, You'll get the notifications of the games are up and roster cutoff, so you can change things up as you need. All right, so that's it from Dave and I. Take care.